Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Now, in case you haven't attended one of our events before, I'm Angelina Lippert, the Chief Curator of Poster House, which is the first and only museum in the United States dedicated to the art and history of the poster. Now, tonight we've partnered with our dear friends at Clio Entertainment to talk about movie posters. I'm joined by a bevy of luminaries in the field of key art, including Dawn Bailey. I think that there should be a slideshow popping up here any minute, so we can see some of Dawn's work. Awesome, maybe. Yes, Dawn Bailey, co-founder and creative director at BLT Communications. Kenny Gravelis, founder and CCO of Gravelis Inc. Adam Waldman, a founding partner and creative director at The Refinery. Massey Ruffini, EVP of creative advertising at Warner Brothers. And Molly Albright, head of creative marketing in the movie department at Amazon Studios. Now, key art, for those not in the industry, is the graphic design we see in various formats to promote a film. In this case, you will be focusing on film posters. Now, before tonight, in celebration of the 50th anniversary year of the Clio Entertainment Awards program, everyone here worked on a giant list of 50 movie posters that changed entertainment marketing. Now, you can see the full list on the Clio's content site, Mused by Clio, which my colleague Salvador will share in the chat momentarily. Now, in honor of that, this evening we will be looking at each panelist's top 3 choices from that list. Now, these aren't necessarily their favorite posters or the best posters, but posters that they feel change the game in some way. So I'll be monitoring the chat along with Salvador throughout the evening. So we will be taking questions and sharing interesting links in the chat. But now let's turn to Adam's first poster. I'm going to start with your choices, Adam. Tell us why you chose Apocalypse Now as something that changed the game.
I love this poster. This poster, I think we still reference frequently when we're talking about the art of collage and the illustrated poster. And I think it was one of the earlier examples that I can think of, and I'm sure someone in the chat can please feel free to educate us all. But of the art of whether it's John Alvin or Drew Struzan, all these amazing illustrators that sort of came into vogue in the late 70s into the 80s. And the style that you see here, the structure and the composition that you see here is still very much in use today. I think that the Marvel universe is a great example of a brand that leans heavily on structures like this and compositions like this. The use of negative space here, it all works so beautifully.
No, I think you're really smart to bring up the parallels between this and things like Marvel when they advertise their various films, because like that parallel is so clear when you look particularly at Apocalypse Now, more so than other illustrational posters I've seen for film.
Yeah, and I think, one of the attendees pointed out Drew Struzan, and it's possibly a miss that none of Drew's posters are on this list, because Drew is really seminal in our industry and really brought into popularity that structure. So this Apocalypse Now poster, which is stunning, I think sort of stands in testament to that style in general.
And I'll reiterate again too to everybody who's listening.
Oh, that's a 10
Tim, I think we can hear your kids.
I got 3 in the other room too. We're going to speak up any second. A lot of us decided that, going into this list, that nothing's about the best or anything, and you've already been kind enough to mention that, or the first or anything. But as it relates to game changing, for me, and a lot of the things we're going to talk about, because I'm no expert on every single facet of a poster technically or even artistically, some of it, especially for something like Apocalypse Now, for me is about what was game changing about the time, the movie. And I just have a personal connection to this poster. I was 17, turning 18. The draft was still here. I just registered for the draft. I thought I might go to Lebanon. there was a lot to think about with this movie. And I think people forget how absolutely challenging this movie was to the entire Hollywood establishment. Bob Hope wanted Francis Ford Coppola's career done as a result of this movie, the multiple endings and everything. So sometimes these posters just kind of symbolize a sort of irreverence or success in the face of all kinds of odds and changing the game in movie making, as well as the posters. And I know some people involved might say, well, that should have nothing to do with what we're discussing. But for me, when it comes to movies, poster images and how we feel about them and what they make us feel and the time that we saw the movie, that's kind of what they're all about. They're like these triggers, like any music or even the smell of certain foods. They just bring up all these things. So for me, Apocalypse Now, illustratively, typographically designed the way that it is, it had a lot of meaning to me. And to this day, when I look at it, it's still a really meaningful piece.
The one other statement before we move on, I think we should move on after that, but someone posted in the commentary about the Japanese version, which is absolutely epic. It is a really, really beautiful piece of art. We sort of, for the most part, almost entirely restricted ourselves to US domestic campaigns that were sort of the primary campaigns, probably with a couple of exceptions here and there. But that was one that I think is less known in the US, less known other than to collectors and people who are really deeply embedded in our art form. So we went with this one. And I mean, you know, once you open up the field to the world of Mondo art and all the other versions of campaigns that exist around a project, it becomes this assignment that we were given becomes almost impossible, because there are such beautiful pieces of art that have existed either after the fact or inspired by. So anyway.
I'd like to say one more thing about this. This was also the first, Mary Ellen Mark was the photographer, and this was the launch of her career as well. And talk about an amazing career.
Yeah, I didn't even know that.
I did not know that either. That's amazing.
Born with the gems.
Yeah.
She was
All
an
right,
amazing.
let's switch over to Adam's next choice. Maybe. Yes, Jaws. Take it away, Adam.
Yes, this is you know, I would argue for one of the top of all time in terms of its staying power, in terms of its iconography, in terms of the sort of visceral memories that I would imagine every single one of us on this in this Zoom have for this piece of art and this film, and this piece of art relative to the film. It's just hard to argue with. This just is, never ages, never feels dated, and still is frightening. And that's a piece of print art. That is not, you know, that's hard to achieve in print. So
it should be noted, we debated on this one too, because there's a couple pieces on this list that started off as publishing covers and then ended up being translated. And the question became, does that mean it should still stay there? But again, I think it's about context. I mean, I think it's kind of inarguable that Jaws was the movie that defined the blockbuster, that Hollywood changed after that. I was in 7th grade, I think, when it came out, or when I read the book. And then I remember the movie coming out and being obsessed with it. So I agree. As far as iconography goes, this is pretty impressed in everybody's mind.
I also feel like people who, during the time when this film came out, like I remember seeing everyone trying to doodle this poster all over the place, you know, whether you were in school or it was my older brothers, like everybody was trying to copy this poster in some way, shape, or form as a doodle, which I think just marks how key art that actually like, and films that actually tap into culture and become part of conversation just really do sort of permeate just beyond just the movie poster.
And again, as far as the kind of memories that these kinds of things bring up, for me, walking into a 600-person theater and having it full to the brim down to the aisles, and also the fact that people were scared in their own swimming pools for a good year after this movie came out. This movie had a big impact.
So true.
All right, what's Adam's next piece? Ah, Matrix Reloaded.
The Matrix. This is one of those sort of signifiers to me for knowing when your brand IP is so strong that you don't need. I mean, this was the follow-up to a major blockbuster film and doesn't feature any of the talent, doesn't feature a copy line, doesn't feature the title, just gives a year. And everyone knew what it was. And the fact that you can take this digital rain, this digital code, and convert it into a signifier that sells tickets, that gets people in the door, was tectonic at the time, and felt universally sort of iconic. In addition, they ran a set of these on a metallic foil that sort of gave it its own holographic vibe, and was just part of what I think made this one stand out and want to be on this list.
I actually want to say something about this too. I remember when this poster came out, and just the hype that there was for the next Matrix film. And I think that this poster, like, it so just pushed that hype even further. This idea of like, we're not even going to give you everything. We're just going to give you this thing. It's like, it's that idea of just wanting more. And I feel like just brand wise, this poster was just like the perfect sequel star poster for that film. Because that film also, not only did it do well, but it just culturally and pop culture wise, that movie blew up as well. So people were so on the edge for it. So when this came out, I just remember thinking it was so genius. I was just like, oh my goodness, I cannot wait. And I think that's what it makes you feel like, you could not wait for that sequel. So yeah, it's super exciting. I love that thing.
Yeah, I love it when a poster connects you to the movie experience a lot. And
yeah,
this one, I mean, it's almost like getting up before the rock concert and announcing the band's about to come up. Like, you remembered this sequence from the opening credits or the end credits of the feature. And when you saw this image, it just kind of hyped you.
Mm-hmm.
What was coming.
Also, someone in the chat wants to know: do we know the designer behind this poster, or was this just done like by a team on the?
I know very well, and now you're outing me, because my partner Brad Hochberg designed this at Concept Arts, working with Ron and Lucinda Michelson, who were the creative directors there at the time, and for Joel Wayne, who Massey worked with for many years at Warner Brothers.
Yeah, and speaking with Aaron, I was told that Ron had a lot to do with the R&D, because this printing technique on this was extremely difficult and complex, and the end result, it's too bad you can't see it here, the end result was pretty striking. It was a really subtle, it wasn't some like clunky sort of lenticular thing. It was a really cool piece of a different piece of art completely.
It shimmered. It's fun fact. So when we present our designs, our comps, especially back in the old days where everything went printed to the client, the printing of it internally, just the comp design, was actually relatively easy relative to printing it in its final run, because we printed on an acetate and then had a piece of that Mylar paper and just bolted it to it. I don't even know that Brad knows this. This poster, this comp, forget the poster, the comp is up on my mom's kitchen wall, blistering away, barely holding on to life. I don't even know why anymore, but it's still on her wall.
Well, now we know where to look for it when we need a museum, Adam.
It's in tough shape. It's in a slightly rough shape at this point.
Wait, so Adam, I know that you worked on the original Matrix poster. So when somebody, I mean, this is coming from a total layman's perspective, when someone is working on a franchise, being involved in poster one does not mean that you're going to be involved in any of the subsequent posters?
Well, in this case, very much so. Concept Arts had a very strong relationship with Joel Silver, who was the producer on the film, and brought them along on all of his films. trusted Ron and Lucinda very much to get it done. And Brad and I were two of the senior art direction team at Concept Arts during those years. So we were working side by side, and the first film I had the luck, the fortune of getting the finish on. And this piece was Brad's, and then a bunch of the character banners. It goes on. We played volleyball on that one.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Well, I think it's time to move on to some of Dawn's choices. Dawn, you went back to something very vintage, which I appreciate a lot, with All About Eve. Can you tell us why you chose this one?
Yes, it was really hard for me to choose. It was hard for me to choose 10 favorites in the first place, because I love film posters. That's what I've wanted to do since I was a little kid, was design film posters. And this is an amazing example from 1950 of Erich Nietzsche. And he was a Swiss designer, and he was actually an infographics designer. And to me, this is just everything that all of my mentors have always asked me to do, which is tell the story. How are you going to tell the story? And I love that it's so iconic and playful, and that it moves your eye around the page. You know the story. It's just gorgeous. He didn't do a lot of movie posters. He also did another movie poster in 1950, No Way Out, and another beautiful poster. And as a designer, I just appreciate everything about it, from the colors, the arrows, and also, from an era where there wasn't really unit photography, so they had to get these images, whether it was from the film or from, it wasn't a special shoot of any sort. So it's just gorgeous. Everything about it is just delightful to me.
I love hearing your background on designers and your take on the designers, because I appreciate this on the same sort of design levels, but just hearing you give me the history of that designer and how rare it was for him to delve into movie posters, it just makes me look at this in a completely different way, which I'm hoping is what happens for a lot of people when they listen to us talk about this stuff.
It's incredibly modern too. Like, I don't know. I feel like trying to get away with that poster right now would actually be difficult. It feels like it takes so many chances, with just even the way she's cropped in the corner. It just feels so great, and it feels like very freeing to me. That's what I love about it. It just feels.
I think that the copy line might get pretty challenged nowadays too.
Yeah, but to Kenny's point about the cropping, to go from the cropping in the lower left corner to the tiniest of tiny people in the upper,
Yep, exactly.
That kind of scale change is just so brave. It's just so
brave. Yep, so true.
I think too, with a poster like this, is one of the biggest challenges in creating key art for a 2-hour film is, how do you take those 2 hours and make one static image that actually tells a story? And that is, as an executive at a studio, like, our biggest challenge is, how are we doing that? And this is just a perfect example of being able to distill that 2 hours into one static image in a way that's just eye-catching and all the things we just described. It's really great.
Dawn, I feel very dumb for this. I had no idea this was by Erich Nietzsche. Just because I'm very familiar with his General Dynamics series. We were planning on doing a show on his General Dynamics series. I collect his pieces, but I never knew we did the All About Eve poster.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and now I know. But your next poster is actually another iconic work of cinema. Oh wait, no, I have The Godfather. Right. It's MASH? Well then, I guess my notes are wrong.
Oh no,
MASH.
This is correct. I chose MASH because I was looking, trying to broaden out and bring some older posters into our discussion. And MASH is kind of an interesting example of an iconic poster, not using any stars' faces or any stars' names in any sort of big way. This is totally pre-Photoshop. This is during the pop era. It's so genius. This is done by a designer named Arsen Rohe. He's from Croatia. He's a fine art painter. He did 3 movie posters. He also did Straw Dogs. And I can't remember the other poster. Somebody will tell me. It's the one with the doorbells. Somebody knows who it is and they'll pop it up there. So this is a collage that he's painted to fix all the edges. But what an amazing poster. I mean, it's irreverent, it's sexy but dirty, it's weird, it's a mashup of a figure and legs. It is one of those things that when you look at it, you just think, would I have been able to think of this? I have no idea. How does a brain have this epiphany? And as a designer, I just think it's just perfect. And like Kenny brought up earlier about negative space. Look at that negative space. It's so confident. It's such a beautiful, beautiful piece. You know, would it work now? I don't know. I mean, I think it's one of the most symbolic, iconic, fun ways to sell a film, because you're selling the experience without just selling the celebrity. You know, it's really of the film, not marketing the film.
Right.
I don't know. I love how you describe it, right down to racy and sexy, which is so ironic considering it's a hand, and just the insanity it took to design it, and the peace symbol. I mean, there's definitely a message in there as well. I mean, and I also remember, again, I love giving these movies context. I remember when the movie came out, and it was a very racy, very different sort of movie at the time. And it kind of reminds you of some of the scenes from the movie that shocked, the Hot Lips Houlihan shower scene and all that kind of stuff, where it's just I don't know, it's just amazing design. And it even reminds me a little bit of the later Kubrick Full Metal Jacket, just in terms of how the helmet's treated a little bit. But it's pretty brilliant. And the fact that it's all black and white, or virtually all black and white, yet another bold thing.
Yeah.
It's so simple. It's just really stunning.
Yeah, I think that with the use of the black and white to just make the American flag the only color there, that pop of color just is such a good choice.
But even down to how the shoe is centered over the logo at the bottom, which shows you this was designed. You know, it's not an illustrator handing over a piece of something. This is working. All of it's working together. You know.
I think too, the one thing, it's so iconic. I mean, you've obviously, people have seen this image on shirts too. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that, like that's how iconic this image was. Like it lived beyond the poster later. It's just like so genius.
But the copy rode the edge too. I mean, they're making sure to make a statement. I mean, at the time, damn was not necessarily a common thing to put in your copy. Right. And it definitely lets you know what this movie's position is on a lot of things in a way that feels very subtle now, but at the time it wasn't that subtle.
Yeah.
I do notice that people keep asking about the designers' names, but there's an article in the Clios where you can go and all the information is in the article as well.
Yeah, Salvador has dropped it in the chat before, but he'll drop a link to the list again so everyone can see all the designers' names. But Dawn, let's look at your third choice, which I believe is The Last Temptation of Christ.
It is.
Yes. Tell me why you chose this one, because I love this poster.
I love this poster too, and this is Joseph Karoff, and he is just an incredible designer. I chose this because there's no movie star on here. There is, this is once again, how do you tell a story in the most simplest way? I'm meaning, there's an experience here. I mean, how many thorns does one man need? You know, it's all here. It tells the entire story with most simple, basic shapes, and you know exactly what it is when you look at it. There's no getting around what the story is. Everybody knows the crown of thorns. Joseph Karoff is an amazing designer. He often gets confused with Saul Bass. He did the West Side Story poster. Everybody attributes that to Saul Bass. It's very, I just think this is a beautiful, beautiful piece. And it's, once again, I know one of the questions we talked about before coming on earlier a few weeks ago, we talked about, is something like this still relevant? And I definitely think you could still sell a film like this. You'd have to be very brave, because that's not what we do now. But I think with the right kind of placement and whatnot and work around, I think something like this is still a beautiful way to go. It's just stunning.
I would love that to be the case, Dawn, that we could still sell a film like this, because this is just, to me, this thing is unbelievable. You know, just like I'm as amazed by the design as I am by the studio putting it out, to be honest. You know, I just think it's genius, and so bold and so brave and so yeah, and it's so smart, and it does that thing where it's just like, I feel more intelligent just even looking at it, you know, as a soul. So, and I love that when you can do that. I just think it's just genius. It really is.
Yeah, no, I'm just speechless with this poster, because I looked at it's from 1988, and I think it's like 20 years earlier than that.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Because it's illustrational, and because it's so graphic, it has like that 60s kind of vibe to it, and it's not, which I just love it. So I guess now it's time to move on to Molly's picks. And Molly, you went much more contemporary. Your first choice was Moonlight. What made this a game changer for you?
You know, I think the way that they mastered the fact that this was, you know, the copy line itself says it's the story of a lifetime, but it was actually played by 3 different actors. The main character was played by 3 different actors. And from speaking with the designer and the head of the creative department, Kishan Muthakumaru, I can never say his last name right, but you know, it was sort of a happy accident how they came upon this art. And really, at the end of the day, this is an iconic piece. It's just full of beauty. You're immediately captured by his eyes and his smile. And this actually came about using unit photography. So it wasn't even like they had a special photo shoot. You know, a lot of times, and my experience comes from independent film, we get movies that, you know, didn't have a budget to have a special photo shoot done, or unit photography, or many days of that, for instance. And the way that they nailed this by getting the 3 different actors into one iconic image, and it's just such a thing of beauty. I could never take my eyes away from it. As an executive now, I have a lot of filmmakers that talk about this poster in rooms, like, well, we want to do what Moonlight did, and you never really want to rip it off when it's done so beautifully, you know. So for me, it was a game changer in that they really managed to create a symbol for this film, an iconic image for this film that was a beautiful composite that sort of came upon by accident, really, is the way it was described to me.
One thing I want to say about this one, my best sort of response I can give about this poster is that when I saw it, I got jealous that we didn't do it. And I remember thinking that. I remember thinking, wow, I'm jealous of that. That is how dope I think that thing is. Yeah, I think exactly what you said, Molly. I just think it just encapsulated the whole thing so perfectly. And like, in a way, I can imagine why it was an accident, because it's almost like you couldn't have really planned it as well. So yeah, no, I remember just thinking, yeah, I thought it was amazing. It was really super strong, super strong, like super iconic. And yes, it's come up many times in current meetings. So, you know, the Moonlight poster, yeah, it's like we've heard that for the last 4 years, like quite a few times.
But even just the palette and the blues and purple and red, like it was just something that hadn't really been done. I mean, even though the execution of it was so wonderfully crafted, like the palette is super interesting. It just all fell into like a real place. And I think in our list, this might even be one of the most recent posters that we even have on the list. But to me, this will stand the test of time, just like many of these that come out of the 70s do.
I agree. I love that you bring up the palette the way you do, because it's so easy to overlook like subtle brilliance and people playing with palette. And This thing fires for me on several pistons in that one of the things I love most is a poster where someone's looking at you this strikingly, because it's impossible not to look back at it. But then to create that look out of 3 different faces, most non-designers just don't know. The eyes are so easy to mess up. And the fact that this thing is constructed this way and still has what feels like a singular complex emotion coming at you, this color, treated the way that it is, but all so subtle and elegant and beautiful. It feels effortless, which is usually like the measure of great work. Stuff that feels like someone didn't spend that much time doing it, that it just kind of should have always been this way. This feels really like that.
Yeah, it does feel effortless, which is, I totally agree.
I mean, it's also so completely seamless, because I have a confession to make. Until tonight, I never realized it was 3 faces. I think I've only ever seen, like, I've seen it in miniature on iTunes when I'm buying it, but like I never saw it full form in the theater.
That's
So,
what I mean when someone makes you believe that they didn't work that hard.
Right?
Yeah,
Maybe
that's
they did,
perfect.
but it's just,
Yeah, it's so good. No, thank you, Molly, for picking that. I just never saw how brilliant it was until you spend the extra seconds realizing it's 3 people.
Yeah.
Now your next pick is The Godfather, which I thought was Dawn's pick. This is so different from what you just showed us. Why this one in your top 3?
You know, in my write-up on this one, I wrote, file this under, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And the puppeteering logo that's used in this key art, as well as all the other movies that followed, came from the cover of the book. And I know we talked about this a little bit with Jaws, but as someone who is used to sort of getting films into my world, and sometimes they're acquisitions and sometimes we make them, but we just get assets delivered to us, like seeing something like that, knowing it's great, not moving away from it, and just making that the mark of the movie as it was the book is, I mean, I just love that title treatment. It says everything about the movie with that puppeteering logo. The designer of the title treatment, his name was S. Neil Fujita, and he also designed, he's like an incredible, I didn't know much about him until I was doing the research here to try and figure out what this was about. And he's just an incredible typographer, and also did the cover for In Cold Blood and Pigeon Feathers. But again, like, I just think this art and that title treatment was used for all of the movies that followed. It didn't, while I think Marlon Brando in this Foreboding Red is like incredibly compelling, and actually when the Apocalypse Now poster came up, the palette is like identical with title treatment in the lower left corner and all sorts of things. But whether it's Al Pacino or Marlon Brando, like just connecting it all to that title treatment, to me, is something that just shows like that title treatment works this movie across the board. No matter when you're engaging with the film, that means something. It's been ripped off, people spoof it, all of that. So I love it for the title treatment, to be honest with you.
it's classic. Are we allowed to take you back to a previous one if we forgot to say something about it?
Sure, why not? It's our night.
Sorry, it's just that Moonlight one. I forgot to, you'll notice I have a tendency to look at the entire package copy. I love when things just jibe in a way. I mean, you don't want to forget that copy line pulls the 3 images, the story of a lifetime completely together, number one. And then I also forgot to mention that this kind of a palette isn't just amazing for a designer to pull off as a piece of art, but also executionally, like for everybody who's not listening that hasn't had to go through this process, designers are working in RGB on their screens, then they have to convert, and sometimes they play in colors that look great on screen, but then they don't translate right, and this thing printed as beautifully as it displayed. And that sounds like a technical thing to appreciate, that's ridiculous, but these are tough colors that need to be nailed to look this beautiful.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I just wanted to marvel a little longer at all the little things that played beautifully on this thing.
Yeah. But back to The Godfather. Molly, why did you pick this one? I mean, there were so many different Godfather posters. I mean, that came both either as the teaser poster or the poster when the film was released. Why did you go with this particular one?
You know, this I think was the British poster, and the
Yeah.
reason I chose it was because I just love the foreboding red for Marlon Brando. Like a lot of the other art is black and white, all with white illustrations of the characters. But for me, I mean, if this was the first time I ever saw that, just connecting that face in the foreboding red with the title treatment, it just said everything to me about the film. And again, I go back to how do we showcase what a 2-hour film is in one piece of art, and that is always something that you have to nail, and this just did it perfectly. I mean, as did the others, but I chose the red because I like the foreboding nature of it.
It also oddly links back to the red of Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now at the beginning of this.
Well, that's what I was just saying. It was similar to that palette of Apocalypse
Yeah.
Now too. And I think this one came first.
It's also a pretty bold and contemporary way visually to sell his movie. I know I keep going back to certain themes like what a movie meant to film at the time that it came out. And this is a movie that, again, I mean, nobody had portrayed organized crime like this ever before. And the movie was impactful. And then this kind of an advertising kept it from looking like just an old, because the movie was so rich visually and cinematically, but this takes a completely different approach to showing it. It doesn't translate it literally to the poster. It made it extremely graphic and pretty striking.
Also, to give you that huge white border is very unusual for something for a movie poster like this. Like to have that where they've condensed the imagery to just that central panel.
Yeah, it's to me, I just love the combination of that title treatment with his face, and everything else is just sort of over there, you know, but you're really focused in on that piece there. So
someone's asking right now about all the white, and is that part of the poster? And it absolutely is. That's the negative space that leads your eye, and
Yep.
the oddness of that rectangle in the middle that you have to look at.
That's right.
Now, your last piece, Molly, is Little Miss Sunshine, which is again totally different, but it's so joyful. Why did you pick this one?
You know, well, one of our incredible panelists, Dawn Bailey, designed this piece, so she may have things to talk about it too. But for me, the reason why it's on my list is similar to Moonlight. I mean, it's one of those things that, as someone who's like actively working every day, this poster comes up all the time in conversations. I think the main thing about this, again, goes back to story. How do you tell the story of, you know, none of these actors were like the biggest thing since sliced bread when this film came out. They really were selling an ensemble. They were selling quirky family that had love and dysfunction, and that yellow of the bus leading into the yellow background with all that negative space. I mean, there is no movie that I can think of that has owned a color in such a way across the entire marketing of the film. So the key art inspired that, and Dawn, I'll be excited to hear how you talk about this poster, but the key art inspired that. But I also spoke with the person who was at the studio at the time, Stephanie Allen, who was part of this, just the studio executive that was handling the entire creative marketing campaign on it. And, you know, it had infused their television and infused their trailer, like everything about Little Miss Sunshine was this like perfect yellow that it is just like a pleasing yellow to the eye. It wasn't too neon. It wasn't too obnoxious. Like it just sort of all felt right for this movie and for the title Little Miss Sunshine. And I think it's hard to think about another piece of art that actually owned a color and still does. Like it would be interesting to see if somebody has ripped off this yellow as the full blown yellow in a campaign since Little Miss Sunshine. But there's just so much personality in what these characters are doing. It's telling the whole movie in this one piece, in what seems to be one still. I'm sure Dawn will tell us it's not one still, but you know, we certainly get that feeling from this one iconic sort of moment from the film. And when you grab a moment from a movie that's like so iconic to that film, it's like everybody remembers them running after the bus, you know, like, and you're able to put that into a piece of key art, like it just speaks volumes in terms of simplicity and this use of negative space. It just works so wonderfully.
So on this piece, Doug Tomich was the designer. I was the creative director working with Stephanie on this. And we had done some teaser posters that Pablo had done beforehand, and somebody had typed up "Where's Olive?" That was one of the teasers. I don't know if you guys remember, but there were like on little note papers that had typography handwritten on here. But this was an era of talking with Stephanie where she always was about color branding, and we had done Juno with the orange and white stripes, and she had worked on oh shoot, what was it? Sideways, which had the green, and she was very much about having a color brand that kind of informed how we were going to move forward. And you were asking if this was all one shot. It's mostly one shot. Greg Kinnear had to be finagled in there. I remember us struggling with that. I see somebody talking about Kill Bill. Yeah, we also worked on Kill Bill and did a yellow poster, but that was a different era. Back to this. What was I going to say? Yeah, we had to get Greg Kinnear in there, and that was pretty much the difficulty there. But it was oh, and Grayson from Spotco. I saw you putting a little chat here. This also required a yellow touch plate to really get the yellow to be a special kind of yellow, and to not have stripes in it. Sometimes when you're printing a solid color, you're going to end up with variations in it. So using a touch plate will help smooth those things out. Does that help?
Can you talk more about what a touch plate is? I know our audience loves printing techniques, but might not be familiar with a touch plate.
A touch plate would be, so usually you have CMYK for color printing, but if you need a 5th or 6th color, the printer can do a couple more passes depending on the press, and you can select to have an additional yellow plate to kind of boost your yellows to make sure that, like I said, that you don't have any variations or moire pattern or anything in there. It's kind of a flat extra passive of that color on the press.
Yeah, I see a lot of people in the chat talking about other yellow posters, and for sure other people use yellow. I don't mean to like take over the color yellow for Little Miss Sunshine, but I do think the amount of negative space in this art and the way that it actually infused the rest of the campaign is something incredibly unique to this. So that's why I talk about yellow with such passion on this one.
Yeah, I think it's always a good point to bring up how important color branding is in posters. It may not be the first time even that a specific color was used for something, but branding with color is pretty critical and one of the most effective things you can do.
This is also a case of kind of getting critic quotes out on an early poster. Sometimes when you don't, as Molly mentioned, these stars weren't huge stars. I mean, some were obviously known. Toni Collette was definitely known and whatnot. Alan Arkin, obviously, but to move a poster along with a critic quote was really important for this film.
I see a lot of people, I've seen this, a type of question about who makes the final call on these posters, like directors, producers, and everybody here should chime in. Your experiences are different, but it's kind of like, it's rarely solely decided by a filmmaker, but it's a combination of things. But they're depending on the studio. For those who don't know, some studios really cater to filmmakers, some not so much. So sometimes a filmmaker will absolutely have to love something for it to move on, and other times, sadly, it moves forward without them. I'm going to bet most of those aren't up here, although there might be a couple surprises here. But yeah, the control over who gets what at the end, the gauntlet that I refer to that these posters go through before they actually get printed, is pretty fascinating, and it's not really ever the same.
Actually, Dawn, there is one question about the title, how it goes from Little to Slightly Larger Mist to The Really Big Sunshine. How did you decide to do that treatment with the type?
So I mean, working with Doug on that, that's just like designer onomatopoeia. Meaning, you know, little is little. And whenever we have a word like little or, you know, like big movie, we'll make the word big, big. You know, it's designer onomatopoeia is the best way to talk about it.
That's fair. Actually, the next, while you were involved in this poster, the next poster is also one of yours. It's Massey's choice, and it's Silence of the Lambs. Massey, I'll let you talk about it first. Like, why did you pick another Dawn Bailey masterpiece?
Well, I'm sure everybody's beginning to recognize a recurring theme here of Dawn and her importance to this field. And I actually, there's a bunch of reasons I chose this. First and foremost, for its design. And in my blurb, I wrote about how bold it was at the time, again, to sell a horror movie with this sort of surreal approach and still showcase your star and the coloration and the little Dali Easter egg on the back of the moth with the just all. And I was a surrealist like nut in art school. I mean, I tried to paint everything that way. But beyond that, I also remember the attention it got. I remember the awards. I remember Demi. I remember all that. And I kind of want to hear Dawn talk about, because this was before BLT, I believe, and you were still at the zoo, and I don't know. I just think it was like a massive shift in posters, but also a bit for you. And then you went on to just affect so many things. And I know you hate the attention put on you for this kind of stuff, but I just have such respect and fond memories of this poster. I wanted you to tell me, what was it like when this thing got out there and it just got all the attention that it did in the way that it did, and it still does.
It's all right. It's kind of an interesting story, I guess. I remember at Dazu, Greg Catchell brought in the script. It was right when he was leaving Dazu to go somewhere else. He brought in the script and said, "This is perfect for you." And I read it, and nobody else was really that interested to work on it. So I was just, I used to do little thumbnail sheets where I drew everything by hand. And this was actually one of my first thumbnails. And to me, it just seemed like it was the most obvious thing to do. I don't know why, but it was like so obvious that I was afraid somebody else was going to do the exact same comp. So when we were working, back in the day before computers, it was really kind of a funny way where you would be sort of concerned what other people were doing. But so this was the first thing. This was a unit shot taken by Ken Reagan, and I took the shot, I airbrushed it, and then made a mezzotint. So back then, all shops had a stat camera. I took it to the stat room, had somebody make a mezzotint for me, airbrushed some more on it, and had a preliminary moth, but then we ended up renting a moth from the Natural History Museum. Lee Veris then he was a photographer, he took that photo of that moth. I put the little Salvador Dali thing on there, but I had to kind of paint some stuff out of it because MPAA requirements were not to have any nudity, so that had to be a little fudged. The font is Opti Binder style, was a favorite font of mine at the time. I was really into using the little slashes. As you can see, I put little slashes in between everything on the billing because I'm a nut job, and I did that. I can't explain why. I was pretty excited to have, once again, somebody keeps talking about touch plates. This had a little touch plate of fluorescent in the eyes and on the moth, because I was all about the little special things in a lot of the posters I've worked on in my career as well. Whether, I was trying to get like a varnish or something special in there. So, I mean, this was, at a time where designers really worked a lot kind of by themselves, had a little help here and there, but now we work in bigger teams. So, but I was pretty happy. I got Jodie Foster to sign one for me, so that was pretty exciting.
Oh, awesome.
Oh, this was also it was double printed, and she accidentally signed the back.
Let me go on and praise you some more about some things that you probably just do so much by rote that you don't even think about, like the balance and the way you direct the eye, the fact that you gave color at the top, middle, and bottom. in just the right ways. And like I said earlier, I love when a poster engages me in a way I can't look away. You cannot look away from this. It scares you, but it doesn't terrify you. It intrigues you. I don't know. There's just there's a lot of balance to this, and I know that, you know, in retrospect, it probably seems like all this stuff was like, a lot of people feel like, of course, well, these decisions were made, and they're very bold. I'm sure they were kind of, like you said, I love hearing you tell your story about it. Nobody else even wanted to work on it. You got that, therefore you got to use all the backslashes and lowercase, you know, type that you wanted, and nobody cared. And so, as a result, great design came out. That's what I love.
I love that no one wanted to work on it.
Right? Like big mistake, guys.
I know, big error, you know, for all Dawn's co-workers.
I think there's a lot of that involved in what we do. There's people who fight to work on stuff and it ends up being the bane of their existence, and other people have something fall in their lap and it ends up being a career changer. You know?
And also won an Academy Award too, by the way.
Yeah.
So.
But also like Jodie Foster in this, like it's just remarkable how her face is so obscured in all the things that you did, but you know that's Jodie Foster. Like it's just incredible that you were able to nail that the way that you did, Don. I mean, it's remarkable. This is such a great poster. It's one of my all-time faves, and that is a fave.
Should we continue, Don? Because we could for a long, long time.
Yeah, I feel like we have to move on to the next one, or we'll never get through this whole list this evening. And I mean, this is a big favorite of mine. I'm so glad someone added this. As a person who worked for a former poster auction house, most expensive poster in the world is this. Why did you pick Metropolis, Massey?
This is a poster. You're right. When I did my research, I realized and learned that it was the most expensive, and I believe that, partly due to its age and its place in movie history, but it speaks to me almost exclusively on design, partly because it's European, so it has a completely different aspect ratio than our poster, so that's always cool. But beyond that, it's the fact that it's 1927, and there's this sort of like horror futuristic thing that's put up that gets everything done in a way that we just don't do here, and I don't think they were really doing that much then either.
I mean, there were a ton of posters that look similar to this coming out of Germany at the time, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and the expressionist font that they're using, or type treatment that they're using at the top, was not unusual. It's just that this film kind of like was the best of the best.
And it's the combination of it, because Caligari was overtly, you knew it was horror. Whereas this one, I just felt like at first you don't really recognize anything kind of weird about it or strange about the story. And then you look down below and you're getting this creature staring at you, and this hint of something that you just don't expect. But for whatever reason, just as a designer, and the fact that it's mostly monochrome, I think I always kind of gravitate toward some of the European posters, even of late. I mean, the Polish posters, to this day, I still wish we were able to do posters more the way they have in Poland for decades, but because you just get to step out of the movie. So for me, this is mostly a visceral pick, because it's just always spoken to me a lot, and doing the research on it helped me to appreciate just how appreciated it is by so many other people. I don't know what it's meant to anybody else on the panel, but it's certainly, I think a lot of people on this panel definitely love this poster.
Mm.
Yep, love it.
Yeah. It's very.
Yeah.
Everyone's just like, yep, love it. That's it. Nothing to say here,
It's
kids.
perfect.
Yeah, it's just awesome.
Well, in that case, I guess we can move on beyond Metropolis to Rosemary's Baby, which was a poster that we used as the background in the official like poster house teaser poster when the museum was first opening. So I'm really glad someone chose this. Massey, why did you pick this, especially when this came out at a time when so many movie posters were using that trope of like the woman laying on her back and using the profile as kind of like a texture almost? Why did you pick this one?
I remember, sadly, I'm old enough to remember almost all these movies in their first run. So I remember how these kinds of images affected me, number one. And for me, the level of the sort of elegant eeriness and the use of the baby carriage to kind of bring this like strange, creepy factor, it just struck me. And then the spareness of the design too. It's not just about her being used as a landscape. it's also about the type choices and the copy running into that title, which then repeats itself down below. It just leads me. I love when my eye is led in a particular way, and I also love being able to find a really balanced tone. The mood in this poster is really disquieting. And what it suggests, the fact that I'm supposed to pray for this baby, lets me know that there's some seriously strange things that I'm about to see in this movie. So for me, it was as horror movies go, it was a different sell than most at the time.
And the size of that title treatment. How often does anybody get to have a minuscule title treatment?
Yeah, it's like a whisper. It kind of, sometimes a whisper just annoys you, but sometimes a whisper really makes you lean in. And those are little choices that I kind of liked.
You know, it's interesting you talk, Angelina, about other posters that had similar themes, and I think this is one that is the first one that I became aware of. And so this, in my own experience, in my own career, became sort of the fountainhead for posters like it and the posters that came after it and those that emulated it in some shape, manner, or form. But it's really, this is so ageless and timeless in a way that I don't know you can say about that many others like it. For all the reasons we've just enumerated, even
say you probably, I would never say you could say it about others. I mean, I'll reiterate what we all said in the beginning, that, I mean, I would never pretend to know all the posters that were being put out in a certain era. And I'm sure there are many others that struck people the same way. For me, a lot of my call outs were based on kind of a personal interaction I had with them, because that's how I feel about the movie poster. I mean,
right.
Movie advertising in general, people just have a different relationship with it than they do other advertising. And so for me, there's no question this one is just one I knew of that had a massive impact on me, but I wouldn't begin to suggest that it's the best of the era, like I would anything that we're talking about. It's just an amazingly affecting piece of art for me.
And I think it has stood the test of time in our industry as insiders, where everyone knows this reference point.
Right.
This is a touchstone for so many of us, for generations of us. So, whether it was the first, it's the one that has stuck around, and then we all know it, we give homage to.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. I definitely see that reference popping up every few weeks when comps are coming my way, that's for sure.
Well, actually, Kenny, I think it's time for us to move on to your picks, or we'll never have time for questions at the end. So your first one was Malcolm X. Why?
Yes, it was. I thought this teaser was as bold as the subject matter. I just felt it was so unapologetic and in your face and brave and just unwavering, just to get away with an X. It's like, there's nothing else to say. It's just like, yep, that's it. Like, bold. And, Denzel, I made a point on my blurb that, Denzel was at the time, a pretty, well-known actor. It wasn't like he was some new guy. So, you totally wouldn't have been remiss to put his face on there as Malcolm X. But I just feel like that the boldness of that, just I was blown away when I saw that. I just thought it was so strong and so brave, and very Spike Lee to sort of push that.
Do you know what the typeface is for the X, or was this like something that was done specifically for the
I feel like it was custom. I don't know that for sure. But it feels that it was actually custom, because I know, for instance, Spike, he's big on merch, and I know that X was used a lot in merch items after that. But it was just like, and someone mentions the gray, which I love actually, just it wasn't this loud color, it was this very serious, bold sort of inflection. I just thought it was genius.
I agree. I remember being at Warner Brothers. I'm sorry. I remember being at Warner Brothers when this came out, and I know Clio's credo is for us to usually pick or vote for the things that make us the most jealous. And this is one of those things where, again, it's one of those looks that people feel like, well, of course, what else would they have done? But that's not the case. I mean, I think, Kenny, you're really wise to bring up that there's a lot of bold and subtle choices that made this up. And it's the kind of thing you kind of wish you'd thought of and done, because it's so simple, but not.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was really genius. Yeah, and I know personally that Spike is very involved with all his posters. He had a designer at the time named Art Sims that he worked with on a lot of his posters that had designed this poster with him. And Spike was he's very specific about the type of posters that he likes. So it was, I'm pretty sure he, was very adamant too about pushing it that way. So no, I just thought it was so incredibly strong, incredibly bold.
This is another one of those, where the IP, the brand, speaks louder than anything else could. I would argue this is even more bold than a Matrix Reloaded, because it didn't follow something else. It wasn't a sequel. It was new, and so you were launching something from nothing, and that's the essence of a bold statement.
No, absolutely. And I think the fact too that, I think just going to Massey's point about what was going on at the time, this was a Warner Brothers film, but, Spike had to actually get funding from, certain celebrities to actually even finish the film. I think like Oprah gave money, and like certain people gave money. I think Michael Jackson, people even gave money to actually fund the rest of the project. So, it was really, it was sort of just a feat to get the film actually made. And it was also 3 hours plus long. So just to come out with this, I feel like made it just sort of really just, just showed the commitment to the whole thing.
Your next choice is actually The Exorcist, which a lot of people have been brought up in the chat throughout this talk. So I'm glad we're finally getting to it, because I think that'll make a lot of people happy. But to go from Malcolm X to The Exorcist, what made you choose this one?
Okay, so I remember when The Exorcist came out, and I was in England at the time as a kid, and I remember the marketing for The Exorcist as a kid. I just remember it being the scariest thing on the planet. It just felt like if you it was sort of, it made you scared to actually go into the theater and watch it. I couldn't at the time. I was too young. But I remember seeing this image and being so scared of what he was going into. And that's what I thought was sort of the genius of this poster. Because, there's no Linda Blair, there's no Linda Blair showing her possessed. There's none of that. All there is the promise of fear. And I think Dawn actually mentioned the purple type as well. Just so what, where's that coming from? But for some reason, it all works together so amazingly. And just this, it's all black, and there's just a little scene that is so iconic. And it's and I love just the copy line. It's like something almost beyond comprehension is happening. It's just I don't know, I just felt that this poster, I feel like it's so scary without showing the monster, which is the big thing in movie marketing. How do you not show the monster but still show the horror? And I think it just does it so perfectly. And it's just, I just love it so much. It's and kind of what it meant to me too, and what Massey was talking about, I'm connected to the poster I just remember being so scared about the film. And Bill Gold, like someone said, is just genius. I designed it, but no, I just felt it was an amazing poster.
No, I completely agree. Although I like somebody else in the chat, I completely forgot about the purple. For some in my mind, it doesn't, that purple doesn't register as what the original was,
Yeah.
but clearly it was.
Yeah, it's pretty brilliant. I hadn't thought about it either. It's an odd, but completely brilliant choice.
Yeah.
One of my
There's so
favorite things about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
so
mean,
much in this kind of a cell is like in what you don't see, and your imagination just goes crazy. And I love it when a poster can like showcase something that you don't see, but like piques your interest in such a way that you just have to know what that's about, you know. And this key art does that for me.
yeah, I didn't want to go in there. I didn't want to go in that house, which I thought that's the genius part for me. It's just like, yeah, I don't want to go in that house. But yeah, no, I just thought it was so incredibly strong.
And now your final pick is actually one of a movie I watched during quarantine and fell in love with because I had not seen it before, is Midnight Cowboy. Tell why this poster?
So the reason why I picked, so I have fascination. I love posters where, you know, raw photography is used and it feels so incredibly authentic to the film. Like the moment feels so authentic. And I feel like this is one of those just unbelievably amazing photo. Like this, to me, this, like if you just cropped this photo, it could be in a gallery as far as I'm concerned. It's just, you know, the way Jon Voight is looking and the way Dustin Hoffman just, it's like the perfect, if you've seen the film, like it's the perfect representation of their characters to the T. And it's just like, you know, like Dustin Hoffman's, you know, it's like we're in a moment. Like, it's not like, oh, this is like a poster. It's not a poster that, oh, okay, we're trying to sell a film. It's almost just like we've come up on a moment between these two sort of hustlers. And I don't know, I just thought it just encapsulated the film so beautifully that, yeah, I've always just really loved it. I've just loved it. And I just, it's definitely inspired me just visually. I've made posters where, you know, just that block of color at the bottom with the typography, just letting the image do its thing. It's like, I love to do that when I can. So yeah, I love this thing. And the yellow, of course, with the black, it's just in the black and white. I love it.
Well, can you guys think of any other movie poster that's like post 1960 where they focus on just a black and white photograph in a color movie and have the separate text at the bottom? Like I can't, nothing comes to mind right away to think about this kind of design choice.
I actually feel like black and white with a pop of color has been having a moment for the last couple of years where as long as there's a warm sun flare on a black and white image to say, don't worry, it's not in black and white. That's actually a fairly common design trick to elevate the look of a piece these days. And it still works. I mean, it works. It does its job. And this was one of those first ones, I think.
Yeah, I can't think of any to do the black and white, although someone was asking why don't they do single, you know, like unit shot posters anymore, and they still get done. And in fact, again, I hate continually drawing attention to Dawn and embarrassing her, but I'm pretty sure the BLT had done two of my favorite unit posters. This is like well over 10, 15 years ago. Aaron Brockovich, which maybe it wasn't unit, maybe it was put together that way. And was Patch Adams, was that the name of the Robin Williams movie?
Yeah.
Nose.
Yeah, with the nose. I mean, I talk about storytelling in a single shot. That Patch Adams poster was like, oh my God, the little kid's hand reaching up to touch the nose. So yeah, I think I definitely certainly appreciate when someone can actually find a unit shot or slightly alter a unit shot just enough to make it like a perfect poster. Right. But I don't recall a lot that can pull off black and white these days. I totally agree. Yeah.
The Graduate.
Yeah.
Yeah, The Graduate. Definitely The Graduate.
But I feel like this could have been in the gallery, just the photo by itself. Like that's how, just to me, it just hits.
Well, they're so beautifully awkward in this shot. Like it really does capture this incredible moment that you're just kind of like, huh, why is he standing like that? You know, it's kind of that whole thing that we were just talking about with The Exorcist, like leaning in of like, what am I not seeing here that I should be seeing? And I think when you can do that, it feels effortless, but it's not. It's like in the brilliance of finding the right shot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like you said, Kenny, you said that, you know, if you've seen the movie, the shot makes perfect sense. I mean, it is a haunting, you know, tough movie, and the shot just takes on like a whole different meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So we actually have one bonus poster this evening before we go over the questions. I do want to have time for questions. So this was like a universal pick from almost all of you, correct?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
And what about Alien? What made this a game changer?
Well, for me, I'll jump in with this movie. It's all about memories for me, as well as design. This campaign was so iconic that the trailer really traded off the egg motif as well, and it had that scream in the background. It was actually a sound effect that continued to scream. And then when you saw this poster associated with it, and the type design and this egg, and the egg's not even, you know, necessarily what was the shape of the egg in the movie. They made sure you got what they were talking about, and the copy line that lives forever.
Yeah, genius.
Yeah, I mean, my
Really?
memory is, I'm embarrassed to admit it, my memory is I used to party a lot with my friends, and I was probably 17. So we'd go first row, and we probably, you know, had some fun before we got in there. And I remember looking over after this movie began, and every one of my friends were completely hunched down in their seat, hands up to their mouth, completely petrified. I just remember thinking, God, this is why movies are so great. Like, God, just the way we were affected by it. And so this poster reminds me of that. Just like, it's total immersion, and it's great.
I think a lot of people have mentioned the copy line, and that's really the thing for me here. And I think it's one reason this poster is worth all of us talking about. I mean, so many reasons, but to focus on the copy line and to say that the copy is essential to this, and honestly has stood the test of time itself, you know, and gotten ripped off and used in parody and all of that. But this was, I mean, it's genius.
Yeah, and even I like the type is amazing. And if you remember actually the film itself, the way the type works in the opening credits is absolutely beautiful as well. You know, how it sort of appears like with the negative space, and just like, so that just even like how it's letter spaced is just genius to me. Yeah, it's just everything about it. It's like, you know, it's one of the few posters that we have up in our studio, just as a, you know, homage to like just genius posters. But no, it's amazing.
Yeah, nothing after it in the franchise ever, for me anyway, came.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I think there was some nice things actually after this couple. I mean, even one that BLT did recently, I really liked. But yeah, this one is just so. I mean, this egg right now, like, is so iconic as it is. So it's it's amazing.
All right, so while you guys have been doing the talk this evening, I've been compiling a lot of the questions people have been sending in. So guys, if you have additional questions than the ones that have already appeared in the chat, please put them in the Q&A section so I can find them more easily, because I'm going to now give you some questions from the audience.
Can I start just pointing, because some people are pointing out posters that weren't on in this discussion so far. And just to say it, the list that Clio posted that we all toiled over includes many of the ones you guys are pointing out, because you are absolutely right. Things like Star Wars and other things are absolutely iconic. And we sort of, each of us randomly, or not so randomly, picked 3 that we thought had something pithy to talk about. So
yeah, the task was really just too large, and we all even protested a little bit to the Clios that we wanted to make it clear it's not possible to pick a best list or a first list or a most list. It's just kind of like, let's just pick stuff that inspires, that we love, and talk about them. And so hopefully everybody takes them for how they're intended, and it's just like it's a starting point to start mentioning what you love, because there's so much to love in this genre of art.
Yeah, and Salvador just put the full list of the 50 choices. Tonight we were only focusing on everyone's like 3 not favorites necessarily, but the three they wanted to talk about in relation to being like game changers for key art. But to go to some of the questions that people added in the chat during the talk. So one thing that somebody asked was, obviously posters, like all of graphic design, go through various trends. And what are some of the trends or fads you've seen go in and out of fashion during all of your careers in poster design?
You know what I haven't seen in a long time? Trajan as a font, because the font was so heavily used for what, 15 years, that it became a joke in the industry. Like, oh my God, you're gonna haul it out again, because it worked. So I'll start with that.
If you go back to Troy, that was like one movie that I said, this has to use Trajan.
If there's one poster.
And it does.
I can keep going. How about heads in the sky? Just all of these isms that we all talk about internally as industry insiders. You know, the idea of the two heads floating above the scene on the ground, and the sky bleeds up into the heads, and feels a little stale now, or you have to find a new way into it to make it not feel a little not current. But for a long time, I mean, that was how it went down that was the middle down the road, and it worked. You know?
Wasn't the red type comedy on white a thing for some time? I can't believe.
And now when you're designing something, you have to do 10 character posters for every single thing you're working on. It's not just a single thing that you have to do.
And by the way, Lizette, Papyrus never had a moment. If you guys have never seen the SNL sketch about Papyrus and the Avatar poster,
you should watch it.
You must. I was involved in the process of designing the Avatar poster, and I swear to God, when that SNL sketch came out, it killed me, because it killed me to work on that poster with Papyrus.
Yeah. It did, and I can attest that we worked on the domestic poster as well. And I remember, yes, it was quite painful to actually work on. And that was actually, just so you know, only, I think, and our last two heads in the sky poster was actually Avatar. So.
Well, if everybody hated Papyrus in the Avatar poster, how did it happen?
It's called James Cameron, I believe.
You can edit this out, right? And we all want to have careers tomorrow, so maybe
never happened. I heard nothing.
I was just gonna say something that sort of goes on top of what Dawn said about character posters. I mean, I work at a streamer at Amazon Studios and Prime Video, and we're always trying to find ways to engage customers with different pieces of art. And I know we've talked about whether or not, a poster is still relevant, but really that key art and launching that as like a launch pad of a broader marketing campaign. We all now think about 360 campaigns, and posters as a 360 experience. So how do you make it work in digital? How do you make it work in social? It's no longer just like hanging in a light box in a movie theater. And even the past year is in the pandemic is even more evident of that. So a lot of the things that we do in the streaming world is talk about, like, how is our key art sort of the inspiration that launches the entire campaign? And then what do we do to sort of be nimble and listen to audiences and where they live? So what lives on Instagram is different than what lives on TikTok, is different than what lives in Facebook and in the theater and in out of home and all of those things. And I think when you get key art that's actually like something that really is the mark of the movie, it just spawns all sorts of inspiration. So like a recent example on one of the Amazon films that we worked on was Borat, where Sacha Baron Cohen is in a Maskini. And we had Borats floating down the rivers in all over the globe. We had, hand sanitizing stations in all parts of the world where the hand sanitizer was coming out of the Maskini and the Borat poster. It's about like creating that 360 experience that takes the key art and like blows it up everywhere. And I do think that is something that is trending now in terms of like really not just like thinking about it as what is the mark of this movie, but actually how do you amplify that? And how do you create a real 360 experience by creating a cohesive campaign that doesn't feel schizophrenic no matter where it is. And when you nail it and you get something that really is a mark of the movie, it allows you to be nimble and flexible, but you still have that mark embedded in everything that you do.
You're
Oh, I
right.
also-
though. No,
yeah.
oh, go ahead, Kenny.
Oh no, I was saying one of the things I think over the last 5 years, I'm sure, Massey and a bunch of others can attest to this, is the ability to create more art that isn't necessarily like the main campaign. I feel like that has been a big trend, I think, over the last 5-6 years, that all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're going to do Dolby Digital, we're going to do IMAX, and that's all going to be different art. And I think that's, I think that's a great thing, because it's allowed us to almost come up with other artful approaches to maybe something where we need to be a little more commercial as the main image. But I know Graveless, for instance, we've definitely, we had opportunities because of those types of things. So I think it's really a great thing.
I agree. It's a trend I definitely push for. I mean, starting as a designer, and then I moved on from it. I'm still very much a defender of the designer in this business. And no offense to Mondo. Mondo has done great work, and they had a brand that they still, services Mondo very well over the time. Initially, what they did was they gave a movie some great cred, because you knew the fans and a piece of art was being done. But then it began to steal credit from the great designers in this industry, as though they couldn't do this stuff.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
no.
Yeah.
They have a gauntlet of legal and all this stuff to get through. And so it's actually kind of a miracle to still get great work through that. So these days, I'm glad to see, and I push whenever I can for multiple pieces of art. Obviously, to Molly's point, everything needs to look holistic and cohesive and feel like it's part of a larger campaign with a beginning and a middle, end, and a starting point. But the more we can get the art of our brilliant designers out there from these exploratories, the better, because there's just such a pool of talent in this industry that I don't think gets the respect it deserves out there. And people don't know the challenges of getting the stuff designed and through legal and through the politics of it all, which sadly are layers that you got to go through. But that's part of the job. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just part of it. So when it gets through brilliantly, it's the thing to behold. It's a piece of art that survives it all.
I also think that the poster idealists in us sort of like to vilify the tight crop of a unit shot or a still frame on platform, like they say, on Netflix or on Amazon or wherever, on the streamers. But part of it is knowing the platform itself, knowing the medium where it's gonna be shown. And something like Alien wouldn't necessarily show good at 8 pixels tall or 50 pixels tall. And so if you look at, we'll stick with Netflix, they bought up all of the outdoor on Sunset Boulevard and they put up key art all over it because they know the power of that initial hit for marketing. And they also register that the same marketing doesn't work for every single media outlet, every single place they're going to put it. And so it's targeting. And so the stuff that we may see on our Netflix, on our iPhones, the key art wouldn't work as well. It wouldn't be compelling. And so I don't think it's the death of key art at all. I think it's just the spread to all the different platforms that to Kenny's point, to Massey's point, gives us more opportunity to get creative.
Now we actually have like more of a technical question from the audience. Is a film usually complete by the time a designer or a design team begins to work on poster imagery? And what context about the story are you guys usually given when you start working on a poster? You get the entire script? Do you just get a limited storyboard? Like what are you provided with before you get to make a poster?
It's kind of got two different. Go ahead, Don, because it's got an answer from the designer, the agencies, and then I think Molly and I might have our own sort of answer to that. So.
Oh, I was going to say it's different every single time. Every single project has its different parameters, from a film that's completely complete that was picked up, or to something that we don't even get to read the script. It's so top secret that we're not even allowed to know what it's about. So
How do you make a poster for something you don't know what it's about?
we would generally know the characters from other reference. We work in a very top secret, very guarded way. We have to protect the assets of our partners in the studios, and every single project we work on has a whole different set of parameters that we have to work on. So Massey, you can pick up from there.
Well, the answer is mostly the same, actually, because it does vary from movie to movie. Even in a large studio, it's sometimes it's just a germ of an idea and you start working on the logos immediately. I mean, there's no question that in a world where photo real posters tend to be what people expect, to some degree, you're waiting for photography from the movie, whether it's special or unit, but not always. And that's, I know everybody on this panel agrees that when you don't have stuff, it kind of makes you a little eager because it gives you a chance to get ahead of the actual movie and do some out of bounds thinking. And that's sometimes when posters that have nothing to do with the movie, you know, and sometimes you can still get that through even the movie's begun to get shot, depending on the filmmaker. I mean, I know Vivek said hello earlier, but Vivek was at Indica. I know that Ocean's 11 poster that they had done was a classic case of, at a time when photo real was the way to go, you had this extremely out of the box sort of like graphic poster that caught your eye. And I still think when a movie doesn't have that much to offer you, it's kind of an opportunity until all the other stuff starts to fly in.
Yeah, and sometimes when you start working on a film, like if the studio is actually making the movie and producing it, you know, you're working off of a script and challenging your partners at creative agencies to help come up with ideas for special photo shoots and things like that. But really, until, you know, a lot of times for a film, you know, especially if it's an indie film that doesn't have a lot of time, they may be shooting the movie over the course of 25 days, and the day of like having a full-blown photo shoot during that film shoot, like there's just no world in which that can happen. And so sometimes we try and do just like opportunistic shoots to get images that have similar lighting and characters with expression, so that we can then take it later after the film's been we've seen it and we see the unit photography and like put things together that way. But sometimes we'll buy a movie at a film festival. It's completely baked, already done. You have no control over how many days they had of unit photography, whether or not they had a special shoot. That's sort of going back to the Moonlight example. You know, they're just sort of stuck with what they have based on when the film was brought in, whoever is going to be marketing it and what they can do. So it runs the gamut of like all sorts of ways that you have to find inspiration.
We have a question about key art for international markets. What are you finding differences between what resonates overseas versus in the United States, and how are those decisions made?
I mean, from a perspective of Amazon, we're a global company. And so we think of our films and shows as having sort of a global footprint. It used to very much be that there were international departments and home video departments and theatrical departments at all the studios, and they all would have different sort of reasons for being. And you do have to pay attention to some cultural differences among the countries all around this world, and make sure that if you create key art that is intended to be global, that you make the changes for those particular parts of the world that it might not resonate with. And so, I mean, I think, you know, now we're in a world that just is global. You know, it used to be that Turkey could release a poster and nobody in the United States would see it. You know, now it's like the moment something goes out anywhere in any corner of the world, the entire world can see it. Even geo-targeting doesn't happen anymore. So you have to think about it with the global perspective whenever you're creating art, but you also have to be really mindful and respectful of some of the things in other countries that just actually won't make it. Like you can't show kisses in certain countries. You know, you have to be careful about how sexy a poster might be, or sometimes you got to take guns out. You know, there's just different things that have to happen. But again, just going back to the idea of, look, we have to create art that actually represents the film, that can kind of be all things to all people to a certain extent, and then be bespoke about everywhere it goes and how you actually execute across the world, across the media you're using. You know, you have to just make sure we're bespoke where we are, and thinking about the people that are in those locations.
It is a balancing act. I agree with just about everything you said, Molly, in terms of the first thing you said, especially, which is that in an ideal world, I'm paraphrasing what you said. In an ideal world, obviously, you'd love to be able to have a single image that sells the human experience you think sells to everybody. And if you can do that, that's great. And I think that's a challenge for designers and creative directors and executives to make sure that you're thinking hard enough to find the most unifying sell, so you don't have to do a bunch of different splintered approaches, because it is a global world, which is both a reason to do that and also to make sure that everybody feels like whatever else they're seeing out there is cohesive. Because if there's a lot of different work, you can't have it all traveling. So I tend to agree. You want the same thing, but there are some cultures, there's some areas where things absolutely have to be different, not just for sensitivity's sake, but to maximize your dollar. I mean, there are different things that the different regions value in a movie. And so if you can do that, but it ideally still feels cohesive, if everything feels like, I mean, campaign thinking is something that those of us who have to kind of manage all of it, you want to make sure that it never feels like something got away from you. Like, it's almost the same thing as a single piece. You want to make sure that a campaign almost feels like it constructed and designed itself, that it feels effortless and that everything just naturally flowed, even if there are multiple different elements, so that it always looks like it's just a natural, occurrence out of the movie, which takes credit away from us, but that's fine. That means we've done our job well. If everybody thinks we didn't do a darn thing and we succeed, then we've kind of done our job well.
Awesome. Well, guys, we have hit the 90-minute mark, and better to leave them wanting more than to answer every question and make this go to like 10:30, because I feel like we could keep talking forever. Which I'm sure would please most of our audience, actually, because over 250 of you had stayed on for this whole thing, which is amazing. But anyway, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. We can't express to you enough how much we appreciate talking with all of you. It's been an absolute pleasure. So if you guys have any final thoughts you'd like to share, we can certainly take those. And if not, then I will wish you a great evening.
I would like to give a shout out to the Clio Awards. I don't know that they know this, they're listening in now, but I am here in my career because of the Key Art Awards, which were the predecessor to what are now the Clios. And at the right moment in my life, I found the Key Art Award catalog at a career counseling center, and I stole it and I kept it for the next 2 years and thumbed through every page and finally found my way to Dawn at BLT via that catalog. And the Key Art Awards and the Clio Awards are really the watershed moment for our industry every year, and where we all get together and hug each other and over the battles we fight daily. I'm probably going toe to toe with Kenny and Dawn right now on I don't even know what projects. But the Clio Awards bring us all together every year, and I'm grateful.
I want to say you have a very polite audience too. This chat is the most civil chat I've read in years. And I wouldn't mind thanking, I don't know who is in the industry that's watching, but I just kind of feel like this is a very anonymous and underappreciated group in advertising. It's just the way that the business was developed. I mean, it's interesting. There's still no art directors guild in this industry. So as a result, I just feel like so many people, all those people who are working till 3 in the morning, looking at a blank screen, trying to figure out how to come up with a moth on a mouth, like how do they make it work? It's just such an unsung sort of skill and such passion. And I love the people who I know are working till 2 or 3 in the morning because they just want to do a great poster. And you can see it. You see it in the exploratories. You can gravitate right toward it. And then when you make a comment, if you see something close, and they give it everything, and damned if they don't make it even better. So, I mean, hopefully you all can sense that I feel the passion. I appreciate it. And I just hope all of you get the notoriety you deserve as you go on in your careers.
All right. Good night and thank you, everyone. This talk will be available tomorrow on our Vimeo page, so Google Poster House Vimeo, and you'll be able to find. I believe Salvador will include a link in the follow-up email, and we hope to see you at the next one of these one day. So thank you, Clio, and thank you, everyone else. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.